Before we begin, we want to acknowledge that some stories and discussions in this episode of Radiant Resilience may touch on sensitive and potentially triggering topics. These may include themes of health challenges, chronic illness, and spiritual healing. Our goal is to share real-life experiences in a respectful and empathetic manner, offering insights into the complexities of the human spirit and the journey towards resilience. However, we understand that some content might be difficult for listeners. We encourage you to prioritize your well-being and discretion when deciding to listen. Please remember this podcast is not a substitute for professional advice or support. If you find yourself needing assistance, we urge you to seek help from qualified professionals or trusted support systems. Your mental and emotional health is important to us. Thank you for your courage and for joining us in a space of understanding and compassion. Welcome back, everyone, to Radiant Resilience. I have a new guest on here with me named Megan Mary. She's a dream analyst, metaphysical mystery author, and founder of Women's Dream Analysis. She works with clients all over the world, offering dream interpretation, women's empowerment, transformative journeys, and spiritual awakening guidance. She spent her career creating meaningful change through digital publishing and marketing. However, after being diagnosed with 3 different chronic illnesses, including autoimmune, she began reevaluating her life purpose and starting to return to the higher guidance hidden in her dreams. She holds a Master of Arts and Bachelor of Arts degree in English and has studied psychology, theory, astronomy, religion, and philosophy at the collegiate level. She's a member of the International Association for the Study of Dreams and has been featured in an expert source in Authority Magazine, Parade Magazine, and Very Mind. She's also pursuing her PhD in metaphysical sciences. She's passionate about helping other women connect with the inner guidance and wisdom in their own dreams in a safe and compassionate space. She believes the symbolic imagery in our dreams is a key. Once unlocked, we can tap into our own innate transformative power, evolve our consciousness, and ultimately discover our life purpose. She created and hosts a podcast called Women's Dream Enlightenment, a podcast for women which features deep discussions, dream interpretation, and spiritual stories of awakening. And then her debut fiction novel, The Dream Haunters, a metaphysical mystery of magic, which is book 1 of the Witches of Maple Hollow series, is coming out in October of 2024, which is just a couple months from recording here. Woo, Megan, that's a lot. I am so excited to talk to you and have you here. Why don't you go ahead and begin? Tell us all about you.
Thank you, Tawny. Thank you for having me.
Yeah.
It's so exciting to be on your show and to just share everything that you just talked about. Yes.
Yeah. There's so many interesting things in there. I don't even know where to begin. So you just go for it. Maybe tell us how you got into all of this fascinating stuff.
Yes. I think really it began when I was a child, because when I was a child, I would have amazing dreams, very vivid dreams, some of them in the nightmare category and some of them really in the fantasy, amazing flying dreams category.
I love that.
And I was always fascinated by them. I always wondered, why do we spend so much of our lifetime dreaming? And why does nobody talk about it? And why do we not know why we do that or what the purpose is, if there is one? And of course, when I got to college, I really delved into everything I could find that might answer that question, whether it was traditional psychological approaches, or whether it was esoteric religious or spiritual approaches, or whether it was looking at astrological influences, or whatever it might have been. I thought there's got to be an answer out there. And really the kind of personality I am, I couldn't stop looking. And that was the joy, really, was the seeking. But I used to use dream dictionaries. I used to use them and look up the A to Z. And okay, I had a dream about an owl. I had a dream about a cat. What does it mean?
I
but
think
I
we've all
never,
done that at some
yeah,
point.
yeah, but it never really, oh, okay. You look up one thing, that's the problem.
Yes.
And then you look up the other thing, and then you look up one other thing, and you go, I guess that's what it could mean. But it doesn't really resonate with you because it's not coming from you. And so I knew that to be true, but I didn't know what the other approach was.
Right.
And when I want to say it started to ignore my dreams, I started to not pay attention to them. I was interested in all things metaphysical, but that kind of dropped off for quite some time.
Okay.
And it wasn't until I started experiencing all these medical issues and really had a perfect storm that wasn't perfect, where they all converged around the same time, I realized that I needed to do some spirit and mind healing in addition to the
Oh,
body healing,
yeah.
and that I really needed to figure out what that was. And I was really desperate for a solution. And I started meditating. And when I started doing that, I started really listening a little bit more than I had been to my inner wisdom, to my inner voice, to higher self messages, and then reopened the door to the dreams. And when I did that and I started recording my dreams, I started getting all sorts of information and guidance there. And it was almost a little bit too much because I felt overwhelmed by, like, I had to catch up, like I had
Oh,
been
yeah.
away.
And by
And
recording your dreams, do you mean like just writing them down then
yes,
when you woke up? Okay.
yes. And I received the instruction rather strongly that this was what I was supposed to be doing out in the world, and that I needed to overcome all of my stuff, all
Mm.
of my imposter syndrome and my
Ooh.
introvertedness and my hiding and my fear and my doubt and all that, to get out there and put this out to help other women on their journeys. And it wasn't an easy thing because
No,
I wasn't
never.
even on social media. I didn't want to go on video. I didn't want to
Oh, yeah.
talk to anybody about it. So that really was the beginning of it. And when I started down that path and I started seeing all the numbers and the synchronicities and the guidance, and really it was just bing, bing, one thing after another, like a giant domino game. And I realized, okay, I'm just going to follow this as fast as I can and do everything that I can. And the podcast was one of them.
Okay.
I would have never thought of starting the podcast. Now, the funny part is that when I was in high school, I actually thought about going into radio, but
Oh,
I never
interesting.
did.
Hmm.
And so I ended up studying English literature. And part of that, so many times we think, oh, all these different parts of our lives are disparate and they don't have a connection and they don't make sense together. But when you start to see that 1,000-foot view, you start to realize they all make sense together.
Yeah.
Because even though I didn't actually study creative writing, I studied British literature and medieval literature. I had loved stories. I loved analyzing poetry and
Mhm.
reading Shakespeare and all this sort of thing. And I came to realize that dreams are stories.
Yeah.
And that if we can understand what the story is telling us, what the moral of the story is, what the message of the story is, what the inspiration of the story is, that then we can start to decode that and tap into what's coming to us from the universe, our higher self, our greater wisdom that isn't trapped in by those ego limitations that
Yeah.
we in this life get trapped in with. So it combined a lot of the things that I had done on my path that I thought didn't make sense. And then you add in digital marketing, and then that's where I said, I know how to do this. I've set up a million websites. I know how to create videos. I know how to make
Yeah.
things, but I didn't want to be part of social media because as an
Mm.
introvert, I was like, no, that's not for me. I don't want to do that. And so I really had to bring that in and say, okay, embrace this, let it help you get that word out.
Yeah. Yeah, it's the best way to market ourselves this day and age. My mom used to, when I was a kid, she would do print advertising. That was her job. And so I'm very familiar with what that was like back in the day. And we're very fortunate nowadays to have the social media outlet, I think, for marketing and stuff like that, because it was so expensive. And it's still to this day, print marketing is so expensive. So
Yeah.
if you can utilize the social media stuff, I know it's not ideal. I know sometimes I'm like, man, I wish I could take a break from Instagram and Facebook, but I run too many businesses on them. So,
Yeah.
but I'm
Yeah.
glad you overcame that fear.
Yes. And I realized after doing that, doing the podcast, that there just all of the feedback that I got and all of the people that just came out of the corners of the world to say what you're doing is important was
Mm.
so just validating and helped
Mm.
me get over that hump and helped me move forward and continue and feel confident in what I was saying and doing. Because for me, coming from such a traditional academic background, it was difficult for me to step into that space of saying, I'm going to be a dream analyst. Because, of course, the first thing I thought everybody was going to ask is, are you a psychologist? Are you a
Mm.
psychiatrist? Are you qualified to do that? Do you have your
Mm.
plaque on the wall? And of course, I have plaques, but not that one. And so it was very difficult to take that inner knowing and say, maybe in this lifetime, in this reality, I might not suit your qualifications, but I'm coming from legacies of this knowledge that I'm just remembering now. And it doesn't fall by those constraints. So
Yeah. Yeah, that's super interesting. So then what direction did you decide to go when you decided to finally do the dream stuff? You said the podcast was the first thing. And then how did you start doing, do you do one-on-one?
I do, yes.
Stuff?
And I actually started shortly before that, I started the business, which I called Women's Dream Analysis. And it's basically what it says. It's doing dream analysis with women as a part of a personal growth strategy, really helping them appreciate their dreams first off, start to remember them, start to understand what to look for and how to learn their own dream language, and then what do we do with that afterwards? How do we move forward with that knowledge? And how can we integrate it into our lives so that we really develop and understand ourselves and the world and our purpose and everything better?
Yeah, it's so interesting. I've always thought dreams were super interesting. So do you find that once people start recording their dreams more and more, then they start paying better attention to them and you start learning more from them? And just because I've never actually done that. I've never recorded my dreams, but I
Mm.
also, every once in a while, I'm like, oh, that was an interesting one.
Yes, absolutely. And the more you record them, the more you start to incorporate the knowledge that they're offering.
Mm.
And then your life becomes influenced by that knowledge. And then your dreams start to become influenced by it's this constant recurring cycle because you're going to sleep, waking up, going to sleep, waking up. And it helps to integrate the subconscious and the conscious. It really merges those two parts of your brain. And really, your conscious is only 5% of your existence, and your subconscious is 95%. So we're only dealing with the tip of the iceberg all the
Interesting.
time.
Yeah.
And the subconscious is the 95% that's actually influencing all the decisions and worldview and behavior patterns, everything that influences how you perceive reality to be, what you think its limitations are, what you think your role is in it, how you perceive yourself, all of those things come from the subconscious. And they come out in the dreams. And when we can identify them, it's like any other energy or spiritual work. You hear people talk all the time about uncovering blocks and transforming belief systems and changing patterns. Dreams is really another way to access that process.
Nice. So then when you work with people, is it usually a multi-session type situation, or how does that usually work? Hi, friend, and welcome to this episode of Radiant Resilience. We are always looking for new guests on the podcast. I want to highlight you if you have a story of resilience that inspires others. Everyone has a story, and I believe that sharing yours can help others feel less alone. Are you ready to share your journey and inspire others? I want to hear from you. Every story has the power to impact lives and foster a supportive community. If you have a tale of overcoming adversity, personal growth, or a unique perspective on life's challenges, I would love to have you as a guest on the podcast. To become a guest, please email us directly at radiantresiliencepodcast@gmail.com or click the link in the show notes to become a guest. Join us in spreading hope, strength, and inspiration one story at a time. Be brave and share your story so others feel less alone. I hope to see you soon.
I have something that I call a journey that is a 4-session set. And then I also have 90-day programs because it really does help to observe over time, especially with recurring dreams, because they might not happen for a while. And when you start to track your recurring dreams and you track, well, it's that dream again. Here's what made it similar, but here's what made it different. Then you can start looking at the differences and the similarities and really analyze that, because when you can start to pay attention to those dreams, whether they're recurring nightmares or otherwise, you can change the course of that. You can stop that dream from happening, because the reason it keeps coming up is because you're not paying attention to it.
So then when you pay attention to it and you learn from it, then it will start to change over time.
Yes.
Oh, that's so interesting.
Yes.
And how often with all these people that you've worked with are you finding the same themes and the same things popping up, whether it be animals, numbers, things like that? Is it usually with each individual person, things just consistently keep coming up?
I think that the theories about the universality of dreams, obviously we all have a shared experience as humans and as spirits in a human experience, but beyond those similarities, it really is unique to the dreamer. So you can look at tropes, let's say, of stories or commonalities of themes, but really you could say, I had a dream last night that I was in a car accident, and you could be sitting around the breakfast table with 4 other people and say, I had that same dream. And then you say, here's what happened in mine. Oh no, that's not what mine was. Mine was this. And then they're all going to start telling their dream, and it's all going to be different. The people that were in it, what you did, how you felt, your experiences, what you observed. And so that is really, I feel like, getting at the crux of the issue. That's really saying, okay, this may be a common theme, but how is it different for you? And it's in the details.
Yeah.
And it's in the things that come from your subconscious, because your subconscious is compiled from all of your experiences, and your experiences are completely unique.
Yeah.
So the people that are going to be in there and the way you react to it and the things that happen are going to be so unique to you that message could be ultimately completely different from the message for the other people.
Yeah, for sure. So then it's up to you to kind of analyze that in your life and what you're going through or what you've been through to try to work through that stuff, huh?
Yes, exactly.
Oh, it's all so interesting. I think dreams are so interesting. I can't believe I've never actually tried to record my dreams. I feel like maybe I'll start doing that.
There you go.
After
Here's the
chatting about
opportunity.
this, because it is interesting. And what about people who say they don't dream?
Yes. And I was very surprised to find this when I started doing this, because I'm such a high dream recaller, and I wake up multiple times a night, remember multiple dreams. We have about 5 to 7 a night, supposedly. And sometimes I can remember up to 5. And sometimes I don't, but I remember them so much that I was so surprised when people say, I don't. Now what do I do?
Yeah.
And through the process, I found out that, like I had done, you can subconsciously turn off your dream recall. You don't really realize that you do it, but at some point you received a message that you didn't know what to do with, or you weren't ready to receive it. And you said, no, I don't want to listen to that. It's like your intuition when you get that little nudge and you go, yeah, but it's probably not that. I don't,
Yeah.
I'm not going to follow. I'm not going to follow that.
Sometimes those things that are coming up, if you're rehashing past traumas or something like that, that's hard to face when you're awake.
Exactly.
Less so then when you face it in your dreams and then wake up, you're like, oh no, not gonna do it.
Yeah. Let's just forget all about that. And so that I think is part of it. Now, of course, there's other things. If you're taking medication, if you've had injuries to the head, if you have hormonal imbalances. So one of the interesting things about working with women is that we have the estrogen factor, and estrogen actually does influence our dream recall. So when our estrogen is high, our dream recall is high. And so it has a cyclical cycle to
Yeah.
that throughout the month and throughout our lives in terms of how much we have of that hormone and how much we're remembering. And then it's also really just a matter of practice, like meditation or yoga or any other quote unquote practice. It's a mindfulness practice. It's something that you intentionally decide that you're going to make part of your life, that you're going to carve out space for, and that you're going to take time to reflect on. And you make that part of your practice, your daily life. And when you do, your dreams become more part of your attention span. You start to remember them more.
Yeah. And I know you mostly work with women, but
Mhm.
have you worked with many men? Do you know if there's a big difference between men's dreams, women's dreams? Obviously, everybody's experiences are different for sure, but I just wonder if it varies male to female or not at all, or
It does, but not, I don't know this from my experience, but there is an author, Patricia Garfield, and she has a book called Women's Bodies, Women's Dreams. And in that study, in that book, she features a study where they observed men's dreams and women's dreams. And they found that men don't write down as much detail of the dream. Whether or not they
oh,
remember as much detail, they're very brief recordings. And the women could go on for pages. It's an epic saga. They remember all this detail. And that makes it a lot easier to analyze because you're getting a lot more of the story. And they actually have a little quiz in the book where they show you little excerpts and they say, which one do you think this is, a man's dream or a women's dream? And so
mm,
you can really start to tell the difference. And I thought that was really interesting. In terms of themes, there's probably thematic differences as well. I think it's just for women, it's part of our, it's for men too, it's part of emotional processing, but I find that working with women is just comes naturally to me. And it's something that I was called to do pretty much.
yeah, I love that. And it's always hindsight's always 2020, right? When you look back, like you were saying earlier, on your life and all the things that led you here. You can always see it looking back. It's so hard to see it in the moment
Mm.
and recognize it and acknowledge it and do and pull from that and do something. I love that you're doing this. Tell me about dream mirror method.
Oh, yes. Okay. When I was trying to figure out how I could make dreams interpretations more meaningful and how I could really derive that special, unique meaning for each person, I came up with this method that basically has 4 steps. And it basically just walks you through remembering your dream and categorizing it and then deciphering it.
Okay.
So, what you want to do is really just start with the memory. You want to start remembering your dreams, start keeping a dream journal. Even if you have no recall right now, okay, start keeping a journal.
Okay.
Start writing in it before you go to bed, start writing it when you wake up,
Okay.
and just start processing your thoughts that way. Start taking that time to do that. When you wake up and you do remember your dream, give it a name, like it was a short story or a movie that you just saw.
Mhm.
What would you call it? And the second step is mood. So I really want to look at the emotions of the dreams because emotions can really be the keys, the underlying deciphering of what's happening in the dream. So, how did you feel when you went to sleep? And when you experienced what you did in the dream? And then when you woke up, how did you feel? Because sometimes those are completely different emotions. So you might have gone to bed feeling really confident about something. You might have had a dream that really made you feel anxious. And then you might have woken up feeling a lot of doubt about something, for example,
Yeah.
or the reverse.
Yeah.
And so, what is that process? What's happening there? The third step is mirror. And this is really where it's the most unique step in that I try not to put a meaning on your dream. I try not to say, you dreamt of this and it means that, and it means that for
Right.
everybody. And I try to say, okay, let's look at all the little pieces. Let's look at the people and the places and the actions, and maybe there's colors or numbers or music. And what do all those things mean to you? How significant is it that this person was there or that you were in this place? Where does that place you? How does that go with what was happening? And that's really where we decode the whole thing. We break it down into all its little tiny pieces. And then the last step is metaphor. And that's where we look at, okay, how is this story a metaphor for your life? What does it teach us if we look at the parable that it's relaying?
Mm-hmm.
And then really what I like to do is something called dream integration. So once we say, okay, I know what this is. Now I know what this dream is about. Okay, so now what do I do with this? How do
Mm-hmm.
I transmute this energy that I'm feeling? How do I move forward beyond this experience? And so dream integration is really a process. It's a combination of different healing modalities. So I utilize sound frequencies and journal prompts and affirmations to really get at, okay, what is it that we need to turn around here? What is it that we need to reprogram? What
Mm-hmm.
is it that we need to start communicating back to our subconscious as reality so that we don't experience this in our dreams? And that really helps you transform that experience. And that's why it's really a part of personal transformation.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm sure that people are very surprised sometimes at some of the stuff that comes up in their dreams and what they figure out that means. And then, yeah, what do you do after that? Okay, now I have to, and especially if it's something that's super traumatic or sad, or do people come to you with dreams from like their childhood that they vividly remember, or is it usually just current dreams that are happening?
I've had both.
Okay.
Yes. So I've had people that I've done a lot of recurring dreams where I've been having this dream all my life. Maybe it hasn't happened in a couple of years, or then I just have it had again and I want to know what it means. And similarly, I had recurring dreams growing up. So I
Yeah.
understand that, and throughout in different stages of your life, you can have different recurring dreams. So,
Mhm.
because obviously what's vexing you or what you're going through is going to change
Yeah.
as your life moves on. So,
Yeah, for sure. I was just thinking of my dream experiences, and there's a couple that I vividly remember from my childhood. And one I specifically had a hard time going to sleep several nights after having that dream. And I still to this day probably couldn't tell you what it means, but to think about how vividly that stuck out in my head and affected me dramatically, even to this day, I still remember it.
yes. And part of the reason that dreams are so emotional is because the portion of our brain that processes our emotions, the limbic system, is active, completely active when we're dreaming as if we were awake. Whereas other
Oh,
parts of our brain are not active
okay.
and they're actually muted a little bit, sedated, a little bit turned off,
Hmm.
and like the logical part. So the dreams aren't necessarily logical. They don't necessarily follow a linear fashion. They don't always make sense, but we experience them emotionally like we are experiencing real life. So
Yeah.
that's why we can have what I call the dream hangover, where you wake up and you feel like, oh my God, this just happened. And you feel all those emotions of that just happening. And you can't convince yourself that it didn't because
Yeah.
you have that hangover, that feeling. And that's really an energetic expression because emotions are energy in motion. So you've got this energy now that you need to move out, that you need to change.
Yeah.
And so that's where energy healing it becomes so interesting when you
Hmm.
start to understand how that works.
Yeah, I discovered energy healing. I wasn't super woo-woo-y into the metaphysical world for a long time. And then as I was going through, I struggled with infertility for many years, and I found an energy healer through that. And that ended up helping me a lot more than therapy did, just my personal experience with all of that. And ever since then, I've been way more on the energetic healing path than anything else. It resonated with me so much. It felt like it did more. It felt like a more active thing than just talking about my feelings to somebody, which I know a lot of people that have had great experiences with therapists and all that stuff, but that just didn't work for me as well. I've been really enjoying the metaphysical side of it, and I do struggle with a little bit of meditation. That is something I struggle with, but I journal all the time. That's something I really enjoy. So I feel
Mhm.
like I should start recording my dreams because I already
Yes,
journal.
you should. Yep. It's right there.
So what happens in a dream session with you?
Yes. So what I have all of my clients do is, of course, record their dreams
Right.
first. And so I like to have them submit it to me beforehand so I can
Okay.
do the analysis, the decoding. And then when I come into the session, we go over the whole dream again. So I reread it so it's fresh in both of our minds. And then I start from the very beginning and really go through it piece by piece, like we're watching a movie. Okay, so in this scene, this happened, and tell me about this person and what happened and how did you feel and what the whole thing. And most of the time, they will say, oh, really, now that I'm thinking about it, it reminded me of my elementary school and really that I didn't know that person, but they looked like this person that I used to know and blah, blah, blah. And there'll be all these things that they didn't write down.
Mm-hmm.
And so it really is a question answer, really getting further into it then. And once we go all the way through it, and then we look at really, okay, what is the message here? And what can we do with this? Then I sometimes will do an oracle card reading. And then we will go and I will afterwards curate the recommendations for the dream integration. And they'll go and do those. And then many times we'll have another session. They'll come back and say, now I had this dream. And it really will be reflective of the work that they're doing because of course the deeper you go into the spiritual work and the self-care work, the more the things evolve and you start to really see those benefits.
When do you think people usually seek a dream interpreter out? Like, why would somebody decide, I need to find somebody that does this and help me out?
I think it's two things. The one is the most obvious, which is I had this amazing, vivid, upsetting, whatever dream, and I can't get it out of my head. And I know it means something, and I got to find out what it means. Okay,
Okay.
so that's one of the big things. But the other is just seekers, people who are doing all kinds of other things. They're going to seminars, they're buying books, they're meeting with other people, they're looking for guidance. They are starting to see synchronicities in their life. They're starting to feel like there's things happening that they can't explain. They don't know where to go with that. And they're really seeking out some instruction on that. And part of what I started to do when I started to pursue my PhD in metaphysical sciences was to offer metaphysical mentoring because I realized that a lot of people can't remember their dreams. They're intrigued by it, but they're like, I don't know if I can work with you because I'm not there yet. I don't know how to do it. And I don't, I know something else is happening in my life, but I don't have anybody to talk to about it. And so the metaphysical mentoring is really, okay, there's all these number of things that we could talk about and that I can coach or just guide you on to make you feel not so alone in your journey. Like I'm seeing these messages around when I'm driving to work and then this truck pulls up in front of me and it says this thing and then I see these numbers and then this feather goes by and then these people that I come and talk to me and all these random things are happening. And so it's really that experience that I find is the most intriguing and makes people curious.
Yeah. So do you do some work with some of that stuff too, like the physical signs in the physical world as well? Do you
Yes. And that's what
connect
really,
those to the dreams?
yes. And that's where I think there's a blending, right? It's making you more aware of your dream life so that you can start to become more aware of everything else that's happening outside the scenes that you're not paying attention to.
Yeah, it's so interesting. I know. So I went to Turkey once to do a couple of rounds of IVF. And one of the times that I went, I don't know if someone told me about this or what, but I started paying attention to animals around me, like the animals that would just show up because we were hiking and we were doing things like that. The animals, and then the angel numbers, like what numbers
Yes.
were popping up for me. But it was super interesting to then go, but I did the whole go down the rabbit hole on the internet, like you were saying in the beginning with your dreams of interpreting the animals are showing up or whatever. And so I would read some of the things and I'd be like, oh, that's not really applicable, but it's interesting.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I was just curious. That's what made me think of the signs in the physical world as well.
Yes.
It's super interesting how that stuff shows up too. Why is dream work the ultimate self-care?
Yes. I feel that finding the answers within ourselves
Mm,
instead of looking outside ourselves and getting to know our inner world
yeah.
is really the ultimate self-care
That's
because
scary though.
you're taking care of yourself, you're learning to understand yourself, both shadow and light. You're learning how to integrate those things and how to really understand not just yourself, but to start understanding you're not really who you think you are.
Mm,
And that's like I talk about it all the time on my podcast. That's the death of the ego. It's the shedding of
yeah.
all the
Mhm.
layers of who we told ourselves we were, of who other people told us we were,
Mhm.
of who we think we're supposed to be here. And that separation that makes us feel safe. But when we start to destabilize that, and we start to understand that we're part of something much larger and that we're part of something much broader than just this moment in time, then we start to understand that there's a lot more we can be accessing.
Oh, yeah, that is a tough thing to do, though. That's
Oh,
scary
yeah.
for people to face their true self,
Yeah. Easier said than done, for sure.
for sure. Hence the practice, right?
Yeah. It's all a journey.
Yeah, for sure. How can dreams be a catalyst for creativity?
Yes. Touched on at the beginning my novel that's going to be coming out.
Ooh,
And
yay.
that was inspired by a dream.
Okay. Oh,
So
cool.
many years ago, yes, 10 years ago, I had a dream about a talking cat, and I was struck by it. It was so real and it was so just amazing that I started to write a story about it. And I'd never really done creative writing before. I used to write poetry when I was a teenager, but I hadn't really written a story. And it started out as a children's story, but I think over time it evolved. I wrote about 10,000 words and I stopped.
Oh, wow.
And I didn't pick it up for 10 years. But that was the original impetus for it. And so many people, so many famous artists and inventors and philosophers and movie producers and novelists have come up with their ideas from their dreams.
Mm,
Einstein invented the theory of relativity from a dream. The sewing machine was invented from a dream.
wow.
The movie Inceptions and Twilight were from dreams. There's so many things that came from people's subconscious that for creatives, it's an amazing catalyst. It's an amazing treasure trove of endless creative ideas that are only going to be happen in your mind,
Yeah.
right? And many times they can be solutions, inventions. If you go to sleep with a question in your mind, a problem that you're having, your subconscious is going to work on that. And it can show you solutions in the stories of the dreams. It might not be completely knock you over the head obvious, or it might be. So it's something that we have that we don't tap into.
What about for somebody who's not very creative minded, who's more practical minded, when working through the dream interpretations and maybe doing the recording of the dreams, do you find that they start to find a more creative side of themselves?
I think that dreams can provide solutions even if you're not necessarily a creative person. So, say you have a work project that you're working on and you're trying to come up with something, or maybe you want to rearrange the office, your furniture in a
Yeah.
room, but you can't really come up with something, or you're trying to decide what neighborhood to move to, or you're trying to decide what job you might move to. There's so many things that you might experience in the course of your life that you might go, if I only knew, or if I could only think of something. And that can be something that you can ask.
Yeah. Yeah. I just am curious because not everybody has that creative, as we would think of like painting and or movies or theater or
Right.
whatever. Not everybody has that necessarily. They don't think that way as
Right.
easily. So I was just curious if it would unlock something like that if they started paying better attention to
It
that.
could, for
Yeah.
sure. We all have that, all have that capability. So
Yeah, for sure. That's interesting. How can we overcome nightmares?
yes. So we did talk about it a little bit before. Nightmares can be something that they can be recurring or they could just be one time.
Hmm.
But the reason that we remember them the most, and a lot of times that's the dream that come to talk to me about, is because it's the most emotionally driven one.
Hmm.
It's the one that leaves the mark where you're, ugh, what is this about? I need to get over this. I don't want to have that one again. What is that about? And many times when people come to me, they after we go over it, and I have a few episodes on my podcast that are nightmares, they'll say, I'm so glad we did this because I would have never thought about it that way. I
Yeah.
would have never seen the dream in that light. I would have never realized that it's actually this. And now I can move forward understanding what
Mm.
it's about and give yourself grace too. That's part of the self-care, really,
Yeah.
is understanding that to not feel embarrassed or ashamed of sharing the dream. And that's part of the dream appreciation process, is really having that vulnerability and surrendering to that for that
Mm.
healing.
Yeah. Which you really need to do in a lot of aspects of your healing journey, right? Is surrender
Yes,
to it,
absolutely.
which is also a really hard thing to
It
do.
is.
Oh, man. Let's see. We've already talked about improving dream recall by just practicing it. Yeah. Um,
Yes. And one of the things I can say about that also is it's we live in such a go-go world that a lot
yes.
of people wake up and they immediately jump out of bed and they're on with their day. And that's what you have to do. You get your coffee, you do your exercises, whatever, you get ramped up for the day. But what you should do to increase your dream recall is give yourself what I call a middle moment. Give yourself a moment when you first wake up, before you open your eyes even, to think backwards, to reflect on where you just were, what you were just talking, who you were just talking to, what you were just looking at, what you were just doing. Get into that process of thinking backwards, I call it, because when you start to do that and you have that pause, at first you might go, there's nothing there. I can't remember anything. I was just doing something, but I can't remember it. But when you concentrate, almost like a meditation, eventually you will get one little thing. Oh, I remember I was at a movie theater. Okay, but I don't remember anything else. You focus on that as much as you can. And then you might remember, oh, okay, I know. I was with my roommate and okay, and oh yeah, she lost her purse. And you start getting those little threads. It starts coming back. And sometimes people will write down like the first thing they can remember at the bottom of the page because
Mm.
you're going to remember it backwards. So you
Oh,
can always start writing it backwards up the page. So then you
okay.
get that linear account.
Okay. Interesting. So you would recommend making that part of your morning routine is starting off with just taking a minute and thinking about it and writing it down and just taking that quiet moment in the morning right away.
Definitely, because when we are dreaming, we're in a different brainwave state.
Hmm.
So there's a lot of different states that our brain goes through and that our brain waves travel through. And when we are waking up from the theta state and we're transitioning to the beta awake state, we're in this weird middle space where we're able to perceive and receive information that is not going to necessarily be received or judged in the same manner as if when we are fully awake and we have all of our judgments and doubts and everything ready for what comes in.
Yeah.
So that's a really important spot to dwell in.
Okay. Yeah, I love that. I don't know if you're familiar with Miracle Morning. Are you familiar with that book? This guy just wrote this book about his morning routine and it's stuff like meditation, journaling, exercising. trying to remember all of the things. There's 6 different things that he recommends that you do in the morning. So I feel like that would be a great additive to wake up and record your dreams and think about it. And yeah, that sounds really great.
Yes, it's a great practice.
Yeah. Why should light workers integrate dream work into their practice?
So there's so many people out there that are doing a lot of different energy work and a lot of healing modalities, so many different things. And I want to encourage all of those people to consider dream work as another aspect, as another way to access the subconscious, as another healing pathway, and that it works, it doesn't compete with, it complements and works with all these other healing modalities. That's why I integrate sound healing, which you might not think has anything to do with dreams, but it does, because we live in a world of energy
Yeah.
and we are energetic beings. And when we listen to sound, it affects our frequency. And the level of frequency and vibration that we're living at can affect everything about the way we perceive and experience the world. So I think there's so many nice overlaps with that. And I really like to collaborate and cross promote with a lot of other healers. And that's why I have them all on my podcast. That's why
Yeah.
I have all the women come on my podcast and say, okay, what do you do? You
Yeah.
know, maybe you do biofield tuning, or maybe you do smoke and tea readings, or maybe I had one that did the metaphysical messages from your teeth. So many different guests that I've had, and all different, and all healers, all people who are doing the work out in the world that might be considered woo, and that came from a place that maybe they weren't, and they experienced something that changed them forever. And what was that?
Yeah.
And then what did they end up doing? And that's really what I find so fascinating. And I like to just uplift those stories so that other people understand that they're not alone in their journey.
Yes. Yes. And there's lots of different ways, different things are going to work for different people. Just like I was saying, my energy work worked better for me than therapy, but for someone else, it may not be the same way. So having all of those different tools in your back pocket are helpful. And then you'll find the ones that work best for you.
Exactly.
What would you say, I'm curious, to somebody who is just not into the metaphysical stuff, not into any of it, doesn't believe any of it, is very turned off by it?
I think that personality plays a part in that as
Yeah.
well. I really enjoy personality theory and quizzes and understanding how different people tick, because myself, I'm a INFJT, if there's any of you out there. It's only 1% of the female population, so it's a very unusual personality. And certain personalities are intrigued by mysterious things, and others say, nope, that freaks me out. I don't want to talk about that.
Yeah.
And it's not for everybody. Everyone has the ability to do it. And it really, if you're called, when the teacher appears, the student is ready, or whatever they say, it's really that you have to be on your path. You have to be a seeker, as I call it, and
Yeah.
really be seeking those answers and be open to the possibilities.
Yeah, for sure. And I know that, so I know there's some people out there that are reluctant because it's not proven by science or whatever, but I know that you said your PhD was in metaphysical sciences. And I know that there's been a lot more studies that have shown a lot of this stuff is scientific and can be studied and is changing. I think with all the newer technology and stuff nowadays, we can detect a lot of that stuff a little bit better. Tell me a little bit about the metaphysical scientific side of it.
Yes, so I'm a member of the International Association for the Study of Dreams, and they, in fact, do just that. And it's tons of researchers from all walks of life that actually have been researching dreams in the lab since the, I don't know, 60s or 70s. And they're really doing all kinds of sleep studies and all kinds of dream studies and all kinds of research that's not just esoteric. It's actually using scientific methods and things on people in the lab, really testing this out. And those studies are out there in the journals. They're just not as popular.
Yeah.
People just aren't aware of them.
Mhm.
But there are a ton of dream researchers, and They have all the credentials and they're doing all the, have the funding and they're doing the studies. For myself, I'm pursuing that because I want to broaden all of the different aspects of metaphysical knowledge because I feel that spiritual intelligence is really how we evolve and that it's part of having that greater awareness of all of those things that they're only considered fringe until they are commonplace, until they are sometimes experienced. So I'm not going to say proven because the proof is in the experience.
Yeah.
It's an experiential thing. I think it's really important to, I don't know, elevate the validity of this type of information
Yeah.
because it really is, we all know we do it. We all know we're experiencing it. And to just, one of the founders of the association is a former, he calls himself recovering psychotherapist, Dr. Q Ullman, and he uses the term dream appreciation. He's the one that came up with it. And he said, I really just think that we don't have to all be psychoanalysts to appreciate dreams. We need to have it be part of our culture where we're talking about it with our friends and with our loved ones and we're sharing. And there are cultures, not ours, but that do have that as part of their culture. And it really should, it would be a benefit to society to acknowledge that part of our lives.
Yeah, I think it goes along with sharing your stories in general and finding commonalities with other people and knowing that you're not alone. And then the more people talk about these experiences, the more understanding comes from it. And the more that people can acknowledge what they need to do to get through things and help each other through things too. Yeah.
Yes.
So we touched a little bit on what programs you offer, but what courses and programs do you offer? I know you said you do the 4 sessions and then the 90-day sessions. Is that what you did too?
Yeah, yes.
Yeah.
So I do have the one-off hour sessions that you can try out. And then I also have dream journeys that are a series of 4 sessions. And then I have 2 different 90-day programs where you work with me exclusively over that period. And we do different sessions along the way. And you experience those integrations. And in one of them, I actually create recorded meditations for you based on your dream, integrating the sound frequency. So instead of me just saying, go listen to 396, I'm actually having that integrated into a meditation for you that's based on your dream content so that you can just meditate to that and have it really infiltrate your subconscious without a lot of efforting. I have all of those. And then I also have online courses that are available on my website. And they basically teach my dream mirror method and also teach you dream recall tips and just give you what you need to get started to have this be part of your practice.
Okay. And is all of the programs that you offer one-on-one that you work with, or any of them group programs or?
There aren't any group programs currently. Okay. Yes. So the courses are self-paced and online.
Okay.
And the program is just one-to-one with me.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. We will definitely link all of that in the show notes for you. So if anybody is interested in working with Megan, you can definitely click on the links in the show notes. Tell me a little bit more about this book. I want to know, obviously, yes. We don't want to spoil it because it's going to come out here soon. Probably at the time we release this episode, it may or may not be out already. Yeah, tell us about a little bit more about the book. I know you touched on it briefly.
Yes. So it's a series, it's a 3-part series called Witches of Maple Hollow. And the first book is The Dream Haunters, a metaphysical mystery of magic. And it follows the main character, Hannah Skye. She's a young woman that's really in search of meaning. She's just lost her job. And when she was younger, her parents had passed, and she's really just lost in the direction in her life. And she receives a cryptic letter from her missing aunt and decides that she needs to follow this opportunity, that she needs to track this down. And she is experiencing a recurring dream about a pumpkin patch.
Okay.
She doesn't know why. And she ends up traveling to this mysterious island somewhere in New England called Maple Hollow. Okay. And it is a place of eternal autumn. So it is always fall there, and it's the perfect little mystical seaside village. And when she gets there, she discovers that there's a lot more to her family legacy than she knew about.
Ooh.
And she starts to have to not only deal with her own self-doubt, but also discover her own inner wisdom and really be led. So she starts having dreams about spirit guides, one of which is a talking cat, of course, and really starts to unravel that mystery. And it blends everything that I adore, which includes Halloween and magic and vortexes and secret societies and spiritual inheritance
Yes.
and all of that, with really it blends the two. It's the spiritual awakening story couched in a cozy fantasy, if you will.
Yeah, I was gonna say, because when I first read it, I was thinking fantasy, and I'm a huge sci-fi fantasy
Yes.
book reader. So I was intrigued because I'm like, ooh, this sounds dream haunters and witches of Maple Hollow. I love that.
Yes.
And I could totally live in a world that was nothing but autumn all the time and
Yes.
pumpkin spice everything. And
That's right.
like,
That's
the
right.
time we're recording this, it's August, and I am so excited for fall to come.
Me
So
too. Oh, yes.
oh, that's super exciting. So you said that book comes out October 3rd. Is that what you said?
Yes.
So
Yes. And
everyone, go ahead.
it'll be an ebook and hardcover and paperback and audiobook, which I'm really excited about for everybody that likes to listen to their books.
Oh yeah. Did you narrate it?
I did not. I got a fabulous narrator. Yes, Pearl Hewitt. She's
Nice.
amazing. And she really just made it come to life in a way that I knew it would. So,
Oh, that's exciting. Maybe we'll all have to listen to the Audible version.
yes,
But that's
absolutely.
exciting. And then people will be able to find it on Amazon
Everywhere.
bookstores everywhere.
Yeah, it'll be everywhere.
Fantastic.
Yep.
And you said you've been working on that for,
I wrote the first part 10 years ago. And after I had that experience with sort of my spiritual awakening or remembering or whatever you want to call it, that's when I picked it back up again and started writing it. And it took on a whole new life of its own and
interesting.
really blended what I was experiencing at that time with that original shorter story. And within a year's time, it was done. And then I knew it was time to birth it to the world. So
That's amazing. And you said it's 3 parts, so trilogy
it
then?
is. Yes. So the second part is going to be hopefully coming out in the spring, and then the third part next Halloween.
Oh, pretty quick.
Yeah, I'm trying to do it quick. Yes.
I love that as a fan of fantasy books. There are 2 book series that I am obsessed with that are not finished, and it's been almost 20 years since the last book.
Oh, yes. And that's the thing. Somebody likes the first book and they're going to say, "Okay, I want the next one." And you don't want to go wait a couple of years.
George Martin has no problem doing that. And I am
So,
calling him out on this podcast because
okay.
20 years since the last book. Come on. So with them being a 3-part trilogy, did you come up with the whole story in one go and then broke it up? Or was it like,
No,
okay, yeah,
I
explain
did
that
not.
to me.
Yes. I wrote the first one and I wasn't even going to be 3 parts when I wrote it. And then I realized that was actually a way as a debut breakout author to have it be more successful, was to have it be a multi-book series. So I thought, okay, there's a lot here in this world I've created, and there's a lot more that can happen. And there's a lot more when you have a spiritual awakening, and it's not just one and done. You
Yeah.
keep going. There's all these other layers. And so there's a lot more that needs to be flushed out, and a lot more, what I want to say, like not bad guys, but there's a lot more things that she's going to encounter, a lot more other things that she has to overcome, that she has to defeat, that she has to learn about. Yeah. So the second and third book just really keep fleshing that out and keep following her on her path.
I
And they
love
take
that.
place at Mercury retrograde, which I have to say is
Oh,
happening now.
oh,
And so it's important because that's also an underlying theme of all of the books is Mercury retrograde overlapped with other celestial goings on that really influence what happens in the story.
ah, I'm so excited for this. I'm totally going to buy your book.
Thank you.
This is so
Amazing.
exciting. I'm so intrigued by it. So
Yes.
that's amazing. Did you ever think you were going to write a book? Is that I know it
I,
dropped in a dream, but like writing a book is,
I don't think I was
um,
ever going to write fiction. Okay, to be
okay.
honest. And I think that part of the reason that I'm hurrying this 3-part series is because I was going to write a book on interpreting dreams when this all started.
Oh,
And then I started rewriting the story, and then I thought, okay, this has to happen first. And normally, when you're working in this, I don't what you want to call it, new age metaphysical world, you have a nonfiction book about your methods.
yeah.
And you normally don't have your first release be a fiction book.
Yeah.
But that's just how it happened. And I feel that's okay because it's teaching nevertheless. It's
Yeah.
a lot like a movie in that it's entertaining you while it's teaching you and inspiring you. And it's just another way of exploring that. And so I will be writing a nonfiction book after this that will be about my experience and my method. So,
Yeah. That's exciting. I'm intrigued by that book too, because those are my two
yes.
genres is like self-help memoir type stuff and then sci-fi fantasy. What age group is the Dream Hunters for? Is it everyone? Is
It's a
it,
great question.
yeah.
Oh, it's a deep question too. So she's in her 20s,
Okay.
but it's for everyone in the
Mhm.
same way that Harry Potter or Charmed was for everyone. And those are the two things that I compare the book to because it's very almost in the cozy genre, even though it's is and it isn't, because there's no swearing, there's no sex, there's no
Right.
smut, there's very little violence. It's very a quick read, it's light, but it's deep, but it's inspirational, and it's for everyone. Now, it could be classified as new adult, but that is a new category that really doesn't exist everywhere.
Okay.
So if you're young adult, your main character is actually high school age, which she's
Okay.
not. And new adult is actually could be anywhere from 18 to 30, which I guess is really where she falls in. But from what I've heard, new adult really is most synonymous with romance. And it
Oh.
has no romance.
Mhm.
So it's one of those categories that doesn't quite exist yet. It's
Okay.
like supernatural new adult, but it's also for women of all ages because it really is going to be inspiring them on their spiritual awakening journey. And I'm hoping that it will really make them curious about dream analysis in general and how that can benefit them. And so it's an inspirational tale that I think will just appeal to all age groups.
I love that. I know the what is it? Romantasy is like a new category too.
Yes.
Or
Yeah,
the
and
right? Yeah,
rom-com. Yeah, I've
romance mixed
seen a
with
lot of these different.
fantasy. Yeah.
Yes. And I call it metaphysical mystery, and I'm inventing that category because I don't think
Okay.
it exists.
I don't think it does
Um,
either, but I love
yeah.
that. Nice. Awesome. Dear, I guess maybe we'll try to wrap up here. What kind of last words do you have for my listeners who are on their healing journeys and maybe looking for something, maybe not? Maybe they come across this podcast and they're like, oh, I could do that. What do you have to say
Yes.
to those people?
Yes. I would definitely just say give yourself grace, listen
Mm,
to your dreams, start to trust your intuition. Your
mm,
intuition is really that centerpiece of the
yes.
keys to our own wisdom.
Yeah, I love that. That's good. We need to listen to our intuition a lot more.
Hmm.
All right. Thank you so much for coming on here. This has been an amazing conversation. I feel like I've learned so much. I hope that all my listeners learned so much about dreams and maybe you'll get some people that want to work with you. That would be fantastic.
That would
So,
be awesome.
and I can't wait to read the book. So, thank
Yes. So you
you.
can find it all at meganmary.com. Everything is there. The
Okay.
books, the courses, the sessions you can book with me, and every and the podcast, of course. It's all there.
Fantastic. Yeah, I'll link your website, I'll link your podcast, and we'll link maybe your social media too if people want to reach
Yep.
out there.
Yep.
Sound good? All right,
Great.
Megan, thank you so much for coming on the podcast and chatting with me. I really appreciate it. And everyone, thanks for listening. We'll see you on the next episode. Thank you so much for tuning into today's episode. If you enjoyed our conversation and found value in the stories shared, please consider following us on your preferred podcast platform. Your ratings and reviews make a huge difference. They help us reach more listeners and continue bringing you engaging, insightful content. We appreciate your support and would love to hear your thoughts and feedback. Until next time, keep listening, growing, and sharing.